Do you remember what Saturday morning sounded like in 1970? Not the alarm clock, not your parents calling you for breakfast. The sound that mattered was the television warming up, the static crackle before the picture appeared, and then the opening notes of cartoon theme songs that every kid in Canada knew by heart. For one generation, Saturday morning was sacred. No school, no responsibilities, just you, a bowl of cereal, and 3 hours of cartoons that united kids from St. John's to Victoria. The Flintstones, Scooby-Doo, the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show, shows that made you laugh, made you sit inches from the screen, made you part of something bigger. This is the story of 1970 Saturday morning cartoons united Canadian kids. 5 days of school led to this. Monday through Friday meant homework, chores, teachers, and obligations. But Saturday morning belonged to you. Kids woke up early without being told, naturally rising at 6:30 or 7 earlier than any school day alarm could force them to. You tiptoed downstairs in pajamas, the house still quiet, parents still asleep upstairs. The living room waited in dim morning light. The television ritual began. Turn the dial. Wait for the tube to warm up. That electric hum is building. The picture emerged fuzzy, slowly clarifying. Adjust the rabbit ear antenna, twisting until the static clears. Then came the cereal. Pouring your own bowl, choosing the sugary brands that parents normally restrict. Fruit Loops, Captain Crunch, Sugar Crisp, milk sloshing over colorful pieces. You sat cross-legged on the carpet, bowl in lap, inches from the screen. Volume kept low enough not to wake anyone. This time was yours. Sacred and untouchable. You knew which shows came when, carried the mental schedule like other kids memorized hockey stats. Saturday morning, light filtered through the curtains. The glow of the television filled the room. Complete absorption in animated worlds. This was 1970, the golden age, when Saturday morning cartoons reached their peak. But what were Canadian kids actually watching? CBC and CTV cleared their Saturday morning schedules. Animation owned those hours. The Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show anchored everything. Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies cartoons strung together, each one a miniature masterpiece of chaos. Bugs Bunny, with his wisecracking Brooklyn accent, always outsmarts Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam. The Roadrunner's Meep Meep echoes across desert landscapes, while Wile E. Coyote builds elaborate Acme contraptions that collapse spectacularly. The comedy was physical, verbal, and visual. It worked on every level. The Flintstones brought prime time to Saturday morning. Fred and Barney's Stone Age antics, familiar suburban sitcom jokes wrapped in a prehistoric setting. Bedrock looked like any Canadian suburb, just with dinosaurs as appliances and foot-powered cars. You understood the adult humor without quite getting all the references. Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Offered mystery with a formula kids loved. 4 teenagers and their Great Dane are solving crimes, every episode following the same pattern. The chase scenes, the unmasking, the villain who always would have gotten away with it if not for those meddling kids. You knew what was coming and loved it anyway. The Archie show brought Riverdale to animation. Archie, Betty, Veronica, and Jughead in adventures accompanied by bubblegum pop music. High school felt exotic and relatable at once, a preview of teenage years you couldn't quite imagine living. Josie and the Pussycats featured an all-girl band traveling and solving mysteries. The theme song stayed with you all week. Adventures that mixed music with danger, girls who handled everything themselves. The Pink Panther show delivered sophisticated silent comedy. Henry Mancini's unforgettable theme, humor that worked without dialogue, pure visual storytelling that made you feel clever for understanding. Hanna-Barbera dominated the landscape. The studio produced dozens of shows, with an animation style instantly recognizable, limited movement but maximum personality, characters with more expression in a raised eyebrow than in entire modern films, superhero shows, comedy shows, adventure shows, something for every taste. Canadian content requirements meant some homegrown programming mixed in, though American imports dominated the schedule. You watched it all. The shows themselves were only part of the experience. Saturday morning was when companies spoke directly to children. Cereal commercials saturated every break. Captain Crunch's promising adventure on the high seas. Fruit Loops with Toucan Sam following his nose. Sugar Crisp and his bear. Lucky Charms with marshmallow magic. The animated mascots became more memorable than many cartoon characters. You knew them by voice, by personality, by the promises they made about breakfast. The jingles stuck in your head all week. Catchy tunes with lyrics you could recite decades later. Melodies that became part of your internal soundtrack. They were designed that way, engineered to burrow into young minds and stay there. Toy advertisements filled the spaces between cartoons. Hot Wheels tracks that looped impossibly. Easy bake ovens that actually cooked tiny cakes. Rock'em Sock'em robots battling until heads popped up. G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip. Barbie in her dream house. Products demonstrated by enthusiastic kids in impossibly clean playrooms. Everyone smiling, everyone having the time of their lives. Candy commercials disguised sugar as fun. Smarties, sweet tarts, bubblegum in every color. The persuasion techniques were obvious but effective. Bright colors, rapid editing, promises of excitement and belonging. Buy this, and you'll be happy. Buy this, and you'll fit in. Mental wish lists formed as you watched. Birthday and Christmas requests are taking shape between cartoon segments. The power of Saturday morning marketing showed up in grocery store battles. Kids begging for advertised products, parents negotiating, sometimes giving in. Cereal box prizes added another layer. Decoder rings, plastic toys, collectible cards, reasons to prefer one brand over another beyond taste. You'd open a new box carefully, digging through cereal to find the prize buried inside. Brand loyalty formed early. Cartoon character endorsements created preferences that lasted lifetimes. You chose products based on which animated mascot you loved most. Regulations on children's advertising were minimal in 1970. Commercials could be as persuasive as they wanted, as manipulative as they worked. Nobody questioned it much. This was simply how Saturday morning functioned. The commercials became part of the ritual, bathroom breaks, cereal refills, but also entertainment in their own right. You watched them as closely as the cartoons, absorbed the messages, and built desires you didn't know you were building. The technology itself shaped how we experienced those mornings. The television sets of 1970 were massive wooden cabinets. Curved screens were housed in heavy furniture that anchored living rooms. These weren't devices you moved easily. They sat where they sat, permanent fixtures like sofas or pianos. Many Canadian families still watched on black and white sets. Color television remained a luxury, expensive and aspirational. The Flintstones and Scooby-Doo rendered in shades of grey. You imagined the colors, filled them in mentally. The controls were physical. Dials for channels, separate knobs for volume and picture adjustment. No remote controls. Kids got up to turn the dial manually, walking to the set, clicking through channels one at a time. The rabbit ear antenna perched on top, aluminum foil wrapped around the tips for better reception. Constant tweaking to reduce static, finding the angle that worked best. Picture quality varied. Occasional snow, ghosting images where you saw double. Horizontal hold problems that made pictures roll vertically until you adjusted the knob just right. Imperfection was normal. You accepted it. The sound came through tinny built-in speakers. Volume limitations meant you couldn't get too loud without distortion. But there was warmth to analog audio, a texture digital would never quite replicate. Channel limitations defined the experience. CBC, CTV, maybe a third channel if you lived near the American border and could catch stations from across the line. No cable for most families. 3 channels maximum. The schedule was fixed. Cartoons aired at specific times. Missing an episode meant missing it completely. No recording, no rewatching, no pause buttons. You had to be present, paying attention, staying with a show through commercial breaks. Commitment was required. 1 television per household. Families negotiated what to watch. Saturday morning was the one time kids controlled the set. The one morning the programming belonged entirely to them. Those limitations created something unexpected. Monday morning at school. Every kid in your class had watched the same cartoons. At the same time, experiencing them identically. Schoolyard conversations recapped Saturday's episodes, quoting favorite lines, debating the best characters. The shared vocabulary of cartoon references became social currency. You proved you belonged by knowing what everyone else knew. Kids across Canada from different backgrounds, different economic situations and different regions, all participated in the identical Saturday morning ritual. A child in Halifax watched the same Scooby-Doo episode as a kid in Vancouver, separated by geography, but united by television. The coastal synchronization was absolute. Cartoon knowledge worked as currency. Being able to reference the latest episode proved you were part of the group. Missing Saturday morning meant missing the conversation. Being left out when everyone else laughed at references you didn't understand. Siblings watched together. Age differences temporarily dissolved. Older brothers and younger sisters united by Bugs Bunny, by the Roadrunner, by shared laughter at the same jokes. Family bonding happened without anyone planning it. You knew your friends were watching the same shows in their houses. Occasional phone calls during commercials to discuss what just happened. Quick conversations before returning to the screen. The neighborhood synchronized. Everyone on the same schedule. Cartoon references saturate daily conversation. Halloween costumes based on Saturday morning characters. Birthday party themes drawn from animated worlds. The cultural penetration was total. Modern streaming lost something fundamental. The inability to choose meant everyone choosing the same thing. Fragmentation was impossible when options were limited. Rich kids and poor kids watched identical content. Saturday morning cartoons were the great equalizer. Economic barriers dissolved when everyone had access to the same 3 channels. The innocence was real. Violence was cartoon violence. Problems solved in 30 minutes. Good always triumphs. Morality simplified to heroes and villains. Right and wrong clearly marked. But Saturday morning wasn't purely American entertainment. The CRTC had rules. The Canadian Radio Television Commission required percentages of Canadian content even on Saturday mornings. Networks needed to fill those hours with domestically produced programming. The result was shows like Rocket Robin Hood and the hilarious House of Frightenstein, cartoons created specifically to fulfill requirements. Rocket Robin Hood reimagined the legend in space. The 30th century. Robin Hood and his merry men are fighting evil with laser bows. The animation was low budget. Sequences reused from episode to episode, but the voice actors were Canadian, and the production was ours. The hilarious House of Frightenstein featured Vincent Price hosting segments between Count Frightenstein's adventures. Library footage mixed with new material. Production values are distinctly cheaper than those of American shows, and the budget limitations are visible in every frame. The quality gap was obvious. Canadian cartoons were made with smaller budgets, animation was less fluid, and stories were simpler, but they were ours nonetheless. Kid reactions varied. Some tolerated Canadian content to get to the American shows. Others developed genuine affection for the homegrown productions despite their limitations. The cultural tension was real. You wanted to watch what American kids watched, to be part of that larger conversation. But there was also pride in Canadian productions, in seeing something made here, by people who sounded like the adults around you. Scheduling revealed priorities. Canadian content is often placed in less desirable time slots, early morning or late morning. Prime slots are reserved for American imports that drove ratings. Canadian voice actors brought characters to life with accents subtly different from their American counterparts. You could hear it sometimes, the Toronto or Montreal in their delivery. Studios tried to compete with Disney and Hanna-Barbera on budgets a fraction of the size. Even limited Canadian content meant representation, some reflection of ourselves on screen. It mattered more than anyone admitted at the time. Whether Canadian or American, cartoons taught lessons beyond entertainment. The moral framework was simple. Good versus evil. Heroes and villains are easily distinguished. Scooby-Doo taught investigation and teamwork. Mysteries were solvable through logic and courage. You learnt that problems had solutions if you worked together and paid attention to clues. Friendship themes ran through every show. Characters working together, supporting each other, and conflicts resolved through communication rather than violence. Justice was certain, villains always get caught. Crimes never paid. Authority figures were ultimately trustworthy. The world made sense in ways reality often didn't. Wile E. Coyote sparked imagination with his elaborate contraptions. Failure led to trying again. Persistence mattered more than success. You absorbed that without anyone explaining it. Gender roles presented were mixed. Female characters are often secondary, solving mysteries but needing male leadership. Some shows challenged this, others reinforced it. You absorbed both messages. Commercials taught desire, branding, the connection between products and identity. Consumer education delivered between cartoon segments, shaping purchasing habits that would last decades. Cartoon violence normalized the consequence-free version. Anvols caused stars instead of injuries. Death was temporary and reversible. The lesson was complicated. Humor is developed through exposure, wordplay, slapstick, irony. Different comedy styles shaped your sense of what was funny, how jokes worked, and when to laugh. Comic book adaptations drove kids to the source material. Superhero shows created comic collectors. Reading is encouraged through animation. Animated worlds suggested possibilities beyond daily life. Adventure was achievable. Boredom was escapable. Imagination had power, but also you learnt passive consumption, sitting still for hours. Entertainment as reception rather than creation. Habits formed young stayed with you. These shows became touchstones for memory, markers of childhood, shared reference points for life. But Saturday morning cartoons couldn't last forever. The erosion happened slowly. Changes arrived gradually, barely noticed year to year. You aged out of cartoons first. Adolescence made the Saturday morning ritual feel childish. Other interests emerged. Sleeping in became more appealing than waking early for animation. Competition arrived in the late 1970s. More channels. Cable television is expanding options across Canadian households. Fragmentation beginning. The 3-channel world is giving way to dozens of choices. Regulatory changes reshaped content. Pressure mounted on advertising to children. Educational content requirements increased. The wilderness of pure entertainment began shrinking. Structure and messages replacing spontaneous fun. Technology shifted everything. VCRs allowed recording. Time shifting broke the shared schedule. You could watch cartoons when convenient instead of when broadcast. The commitment dissolved. The ritual became optional. Cartoons themselves evolved. Shows became more educational, messages more obvious. Fun was regulated and structured. The freewheeling chaos of Looney Tunes gave way to careful lessons about sharing and cooperation. Parental backlash grew. Concerns about violence, about commercialism, about children watching too much television. Saturday morning became controversial instead of innocent. Networks reduced cartoon blocks. Animation was replaced with live-action programming aimed at teenagers. Saturday morning became less distinct, less special. Just another day of television. Kids who grew up in the 1970s recognized that what they had was special. They tried recreating it for their own children but couldn't capture the magic. Cable channels appeared in the 1980s. Dedicated cartoon networks. Animation available anytime, any day. Saturday morning lost its monopoly. Streaming services arrived offering every cartoon ever made. Choice replaced scarcity. Convenience replaced ritual. What was lost seemed intangible but felt massive. The shared experience, the anticipation, the commitment required, the cultural unity of millions of kids watching identically. Those Saturday mornings exist now only in memory. Saturday morning cartoons represented more than entertainment. They were free. One morning when kids controlled their time, made their choices, and existed in their own world. A generational marker defining childhood for everyone born between 1955 and 1980. Economic barriers dissolved. Every kid with access to television participated identically. The simplicity was beautiful. Before information overload, before constant connectivity, before endless options paralyzed choice, parents allowed unsupervised television. Kids were trusted to manage their own Saturday mornings. Anticipation culture meant waiting for something special. Delayed gratification. The pleasure of routine. Children today have unlimited access to content, personalized algorithms, no shared viewing experience. What can't be recreated is the communal childhood, the Monday morning conversations, the knowledge that millions of other kids experienced exactly what you experienced. Adults decades later still sing theme songs, quote catchphrases, and recall specific episodes. Saturday morning cartoons live in memory, referenced in conversations, passed down as stories to children who can't imagine the ritual. What were your Saturday morning memories? Which shows did you love? Which cereals did you eat? Where did you sit? Share your stories in the comments. Remember together, for one golden era, Saturday morning united Canadian kids, coast to coast, one cartoon at a time.